I watch all the time, rarely comment. Does Scott think Watts acted alone? No evidence generated, but personally. And two, why does think that the case has the discussion populace it does as compared to other cases? Well, Ivy, I believe that the Chris Watts case brings about such a discussion for a couple of things. One, obviously, the horrendous nature of the crime. Now, have other people committed more heinous crimes? And I mean that by saying, have they killed more people? Yes, but here we're talking about the Chris Watts case, and why I think it still is so interesting to so many people, and that's simply because of the fact that you have a man who is killing his wife, and then he kills his children, okay? And the way that he went about it, strangulation, I mean, that is so personal. The rage, the anger that somebody has to do that when they're struggling and they're looking at you. In this particular case, his children saying, is this going to happen to me? I mean, who does that? And then just like, our guest that we had the other day, like what makes somebody tick that does something like that? I mean, for centuries, people from Jack the Ripper to Ted Bundy, to Chris Watts, whether they're a serial killer or they, just do something that's so out of the realm of any kind of normalcy, people want to know what makes those people tick. Chris Watts, we talked about, here's a guy, for lack of a better term, just kind of going about his business. He's got a job, he's got a wife, kids, family, ups and downs of life, living paycheck to paycheck. And then one day, he meets the girl, and next thing you know, he's killing his wife and kids. That is crazy, okay? Now, next part of that question from Ivy was, does Scott think that Watts acted alone? There is no evidence that there was anybody else there. Now, could somebody have said, gee, I couldn't wait for us to be alone? It'd be a lot easier if we could have this fresh start. Who knows if that actually took place, if that was fed into his head, if that made him do it. But guess what? That is not enough to charge somebody. So do I think Chris Watts acted alone? I do. What evidence do we have of that? His statements. Now, is Chris Watts a liar? Absolutely. But that's the evidence that we have. We think the strongest evidence is the fact that he has pled guilty to all of those things. And I think that just simply is what we have to go on, because I just that's what we have, okay? And if there was somebody else involved, I mean, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Do you really think that the Frederick Police Department or the Weld County District Attorney's Office, if they had credible evidence that somebody else was involved, that they wouldn't have charged somebody in the death of Shanann, her unborn child, and her two children, Bella and Celeste? They would have charged them if the evidence was there, okay? So, yes, can we sit and hypothesize about things all day long and speculate? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you still have to have evidence to go forward. You still have to have evidence to put in that affidavit for an arrest warrant to say it. And I suspect, I wish those are not words that get legal documents signed. You need hard evidence. I'm saying that Cindy has a right to speak. And that's what it comes down to. Yes, everybody has a right to speak. This is America. And when we start censoring, saying a particular person does not have a right to speak, I mean, think about that. We don't like their opinion. We don't like what they did. Yes. Now, if they spew lies and they spew, false information, then so be it. But that may be what they perceived as to how things were. Okay. Even if referring to Cindy Watts, she has a right to say what she says, and who knows, maybe she'll say something that'll make everybody click as to why, Chris Watts did what he did. Who knows? But to simply say, shut up, you shouldn't be heard at all. Censorship is the worst thing that we could possibly do. Yeah, the victim shaming should stay out of here. Let's talk about that. I don't get it. Like I said, what we've tried to do on this channel is try to provide some insight as to what kind of really goes on in the legal system, in the criminal defense world. Okay? And there's some channels out there, and I don't watch that many other channels because most of it, it's just, there's a lot of speculation. And I like to deal with facts because, in my job, I'm going to say, okay, that's great, but how do I prove it? What evidence do I have to actually prove it? That's legally incompetent evidence that I can put into a courtroom that's going to be admissible under the rules of evidence. How do we do that? And we've tried to, whether somebody's an accused, obviously they have rights. If somebody is a victim, I think we've always tried to treat everybody with respect. We don't go out and say, oh, so-and-so is this and that, and they, just a terrible person, okay? I've seen people that most people wouldn't approve of their lifestyles at all. They can still be victims, okay? And they should be treated with respect. When we go to court, and, sometimes I say, oh, and this gentleman, and I get, there's all these comments that say, oh, Scott, how can you refer to them as gentlemen? I'm going to unsubscribe for you because you do that. That's habit. It's called being professional, okay? If I went into a courtroom and said, referred to as a victim as something other than their last name, Mr. or Miss, or anything along those lines, I would be held in contempt, okay? You don't get to go out there and just badmouth people. You can treat all people with dignity and respect. And that's what judges are supposed to do. Yes, this is kind of the court of public opinion, but you can still treat people with respect, okay? Think about it. That's what judges are supposed to do as well. And they ask, there's surveys that are done that go out to attorneys and say, what about this particular judge? And they ask you, do they treat everybody fairly? Do they, how do they handle their courtroom? Are they efficient? Are they inefficient? Are they, knowledgeable, prepared, etc.? But the biggest thing is, how do they treat everybody? And I know people that have asked me for over the years, would you write a recommendation for me? I'm applying to be a judge. One of the biggest things that I consider is, how does this person treat people? Okay? There's been some district attorneys where they've asked, or I've been called and said, they're up for a nomination. Would you tell me about them? And I tell them, I think they'd be a terrible judge. They're one of those people that never listened throughout. I had a case once where my client was innocent, and I mean innocent, and tried to convince the district attorney that, why are we going forward with this? We go to trial. We cross-examine the complaining witness in the case, and I come back from lunch and I have a motion to dismiss. Okay? That person then wanted to become a judge. And I tell them the story. No, they wouldn't listen. It wasn't until they actually saw it. Now, what changed? They had a video of the complaining witness, but yet, cross-examination, these are the same things that I told them about beforehand, and they ignored it. Okay? They look silly. But they were also the type of person they're just mean to people. What does it hurt to be nice? Okay? Yeah, there's a time to be a complete jerk. I get that. I can go there. But, it's always better to start off with the nice factor first. And judges, like we all should, treat everyone with dignity and respect. And judges are supposed to do that, all right? Just because even if you think of a victim as a horrible human being, sometimes you can keep that to yourself. Sometimes you can just say, you know what, I just don't condone somebody's particular lifestyle. I think I would have done something different. But, and maybe as I get older, when I was a 21-year-old, 18, 25, everything was black and white. It just was really simple. But as you get older, you start to realize that everybody has a story. Everybody has had something in their life that has affected who they are, what they do. And some people have had an easier road than others. And for us to sit there and throw stones at people, I don't know. I've just found that oftentimes people that throw stones usually are sometimes the biggest hypocrites of all. And I've represented those people. Okay, the ones that say, "Oh, people, if you do this, you're bad," and guess what? They're doing the exact same thing. So, anyway.